There are some kinds of silence in life that speak louder than words, and Ariba had been living inside one for almost a year, carrying memories that no longer had a place to rest. Every morning, she woke up with the same fragile hope that perhaps today would be the day everything returned to how it used to be, but deep inside, she knew that hope had become more of a habit than a reality. Love, she had learned, does not always end with goodbye. Sometimes, it lingers painfully in unfinished stories, in unanswered questions, and in faces that no longer recognize you. It had all changed on a rainy evening when Zion's car accident stole not just his memories, but also the entire world they had built together. The doctors called it amnesia, explaining it in calm, practiced voices, but no explanation could soften the truth for Ariba. The man who once knew her laughter better than his own heartbeat now looked at her like a stranger. The warmth in his eyes had been replaced with confusion, and the familiarity of their shared moments had vanished as if they had never existed. At first, she stayed strong. She visited him every day in the hospital, sitting quietly by his side, telling him stories of their past as if repeating them could somehow bring them back to life. She spoke about the day they met, about how he had smiled at her with shy confidence, about the dreams they had carefully built together. But Zion listened politely, like someone hearing a stranger's memories, not his own. He thanked her for her kindness, unaware that each word he spoke gently broke her heart a little more. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, life began to move forward without her consent. Zion was discharged, and his family encouraged him to start fresh, to focus on building new memories instead of chasing ones that might never return. Ariba understood their intentions, but acceptance did not come easily. She tried to step back, to give him space, convincing herself that love sometimes means letting go, even when every part of you wants to hold on. She stopped visiting as often, then eventually stopped altogether. It wasn't because she had stopped loving him, but because loving him had become a quiet form of suffering. She chose distance, not out of weakness, but out of respect, for his new beginning and for her own broken heart. Time, however, has a strange way of bringing people back to places they thought they had left behind. Nearly a year later, on an ordinary afternoon that felt like any other, Ariba saw him again. It was at a small cafe, one they used to visit together. She had gone there not for memories, but simply for a moment of peace. But peace has a way of disappearing when the past suddenly stands in front of you. Zion walked in, and for a moment, her world stopped. He looked the same, yet completely different. There was a calm confidence in his posture, a lightness in his expression that she had not seen in a long time. And beside him was a girl, smiling brightly, her hand naturally resting in his as if it had always belonged there. Ariba felt her breath catch, her fingers tightening around the cup she held. She had imagined this moment in many ways, but none of those imaginations had prepared her for the reality of it. He was happy, truly happy, and that happiness no longer included her. They sat at a table not far from hers, unaware of her presence. She tried to look away, but her heart refused to let her. She watched as he laughed at something the girl said, the same laugh that once belonged to her. She noticed the small gestures, the way he listened attentively, the way he cared. Everything about him was familiar, yet none of it was hers anymore. For a brief moment, she considered leaving. It would have been easier to walk away, to protect herself from the pain of witnessing what she had lost. But something inside her told her to stay, not out of hope, but out of courage. Running away would not change the truth. As if guided by fate, Zion's eyes eventually met hers. There was a flicker of recognition, not of memory, but of curiosity. He frowned slightly, as if trying to place her face, and then with a polite smile, he stood up and walked toward her. "Excuse me," he said gently. "I feel like I've seen you somewhere." His words were simple, innocent, and yet they carried a weight that felt unbearable. Ariba looked at him, her eyes filled with emotions she struggled to control. For a second, she wanted to tell him everything, to remind him of who she was, of who they were. But then she glanced at the girl waiting for him, watching them with quiet interest, and something inside her softened. "Maybe," she replied softly, forcing a small smile. "Or maybe you just have one of those familiar faces." He chuckled lightly, clearly accepting her answer without questioning it further. There was no recognition in his eyes, no hidden memory waiting to resurface. He thanked her politely, and returned to his table, to his present, to his life. Ariba sat there for a long time after that, her heart heavy yet strangely calm. The pain was still there, but it had changed. It was no longer sharp and overwhelming. Instead, it had become something quieter, something she could carry without breaking. As she watched him leave the cafe with his new girlfriend, she realized something she had been unable to understand before. Love is not just about holding on. Sometimes, it is about letting someone be happy, even if that happiness does not include you. It is about choosing their peace over your own desires, their future over your past. She did not cry that day. Not because it didn't hurt, but because she had finally accepted what she had been fighting for so long. Zion was no longer the man she had loved, not because he had changed, but because his memories had taken him somewhere she could not follow. In the days that followed, Ariba began to rebuild her life, not by forgetting, but by forgiving herself, him, and the circumstances that had changed everything. She held on to the memories not as a source of pain, but as a reminder that what they had was real, even if it no longer existed. She learned that love does not lose its value just because it does not last forever. Sometimes, its purpose is simply to shape us, to teach us patience, sacrifice, and strength. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is to step aside and allow someone else to take your place without bitterness. Months later, as she stood under a clear sky, feeling the quiet warmth of a new beginning, Ariba realized that her story had not ended in loss. It had transformed into something deeper, something more meaningful. She had loved sincerely, she had endured gracefully, and most importantly, she had let go with dignity. And in that moment, she understood a truth that many spend a lifetime trying to learn. Love is not measured by how long it lasts, but by how deeply it touches the soul. Even when memories fade, even when paths change, the impact of true love remains, quietly shaping who we become. Her heart was no longer waiting for what had been lost. It was open to what was yet to come. And for the first time in a long while, she smiled. Not because she had forgotten the past, but because she had finally made peace with it.